we're going to, we learned a lot last time about the giving of the Torah and, how it, we should be so honored that Hashem gave it to us as the human people, and we're the ones, who could really bring the essence of God into this world. Now, we're going to talk about the parsha of the week, which is Naso. And, Hashem is counting the Jewish people, and he wants. Okay, let me start over. In this book, in this Torah portion, Hashem is beginning with telling Moshe to complete his count, because Naso in Hebrew, it means count. And that's the name of this week's Torah portion. And it records this whole purification process that the Jews need to undergo before, settling in, before they set out from Mount Sinai to go to the land of Israel. And then it talks about the different offerings of different princes. Each tribe, each Shevet had a prince, and they made different donations to the tabernacle on the day that it began to function. And what is emphasized with their offerings? How the Jewish people's journey through this desert, that we have so many stories of them going through the desert and all the different things that are going to happen here. So this is emphasizing how when they go through the desert, they need to fulfill our mission in a collective way, and also on an individual experience as well. And then we learn from that about how we learn, because they are donating stuff, we're learning that that's our idea, that collectively and individually, we need to be, making it an experience. We're fulfilling God's mission, and we're using our physical things, and we're donating it to the tabernacle. We are staying focused that God is the one who gives us everything, and Hashem is the one we're supposed to serve. And this idea of using everything I have to fulfill my divine mission and to serve Hashem. So, in last week's Torah portion in Bamidbar, which means desert, we were talking about this idea of counting the tribe of Levi, and it's divided into, he had three sons, Kahas, Gershon, Kahas, Merari. And so we spoke last time about Kahas, and now we're going to talk about the other two in this Torah portion, Gershon and Merari. And it's a little strange because we're talking about counting the Levites, the whole tribe of Levi. And why are we only talking about, why are we dividing it? Why are we separating it? How come in last week's Torah portion, we talk about Kahas, 1/3, and then the other 2/3 we're talking about in this Torah portion? Why are we breaking in middle of this seemingly one idea? So Gershon was the oldest of Kahas and Merari. And so that's also another question we have. Why is Kahas being counted first if he's only the second child? Really would seem that Gershon, is the oldest child, should be counted first. And so according to the Medrash, the Torah gives precedence to Kahas because they carried the Arai. They carried the ark, which had in it the luchos, which had in it the tablets. And since they carried the Torah, which is the way that we're able to bind ourselves, this gives us the rules and the tools of how to bind ourselves to Hashem. So they are described first, because this is like basically saying the most important thing is the luchos, the tablets, the Torah. That's what we need. That is most important. So whoever carries the Torah, they're first. Because our whole mission, as we stated a few minutes ago, is to bind ourselves to Hashem in everything we do. That's why we said, it's talking about all their donations, because, that's what, at the end of the day, what are you donating to God? What are you taking that's yours and giving to Hashem to make the world a better place? So what does it use? So that's why they were first. Now, what does it use when it counts to count the Jewish people? It says Naso, which really means, we said it means to count, but literally what it literally means is to lift. Okay? That's why a leader is called a Nasi, a leader, because he is lifted above the rest of the people. And so that's the idea, that counting the people, we're using this specific terminology of lifting heads. Because what are we doing? When you count someone and you say you're part of this army, what you're essentially doing is you are lifting them to this level. So by counting the Jewish people, we are basically summoning forth their latent capabilities, and we're saying, you want to be in Hashem's army? We're lifting you to be in this category. We're elevating you to this level. So that's the idea. This Torah portion is called Naso, to lift up, because we are describing the uplift that preceded the Jews starting this whole journey of them in the desert. And that is the uplift, that we have to elevate ourselves in order to go through this journey. You could, in the desert, you could be thirsty, you could be lost, it could be very overwhelming. What's the idea? That you need to lift yourself up. We need to be elevated in order to journey through without thirsting, without not having food, without, getting attacked, etc. So the Torah portion begins and it says, take a census, take account of the clan of Gershon. And the fact that the clan, this, again, we said that there were 3 sons. So this Gershon and his, family, his descendants, that clan, we have to take a census. And that's what it starts off. It says, take a census of them too. Meaning, like, in addition to Kahas, that was in last Torah portion, now we're going to be taking a census of Gershon. And the fact that the clan of Gershon's tally is presented like 2 in addition, meaning secondary to the clan of Kahas, it sounds as if it's like kind of like an afterthought. And it indicates that the real tallying, the real raising of the head was done with Kahas, with the first one that we had in last week's Torah portion. And this is because, as we said, the clan of Kahas, they carried the Arai. They carried, which contained in it the luchos, which contained the tablets. And that is most important. This is most important. Our Torah, following the Torah in any instance, whatever is going on. So, so what we're saying over here is that the Torah is the real means which we raise our heads. The reason, so we first talk about kahas and counting them. Then we say Naso, we're going to lift everybody up to be a part of God's army, to be able to do their mission. And this is only after we had kahas, could we count and lift everybody up. Naso means to lift up. We can't lift up unless we have the prerequisite of kahas, which is the luchais tablets, because they carried. So we can't be lifted up unless we have a Torah. That is the way that we are lifted up. And that's the way that we'll be elevated. And it's for this reason that they were first. So when our mind is elevated, our whole life is elevated together with it. It's kind of like, as you read different things or you can listen to different classes, those things that you're reading, that you're listening to, that's filling your mind. Your brain works 24/7, constantly going. So what you fill your brain with, when your mind is elevated, if you fill your brain with crazy murder stories, that's what's swimming around in your brain. That's what's going to be affecting your thought process about different things. When you fill it with silly TV shows that are talking about vanity, or you look at, magazines for fashion all day and all night, and that's what your mind is working. That's what's in your mind. You do a little bit of that and a lot of it, then you'll have a mix. So that's what we say. When our mind is elevated and our mind is thinking of Torah all the time, then we are elevated. Then not only is my mind elevated, my whole self is elevated, because my mind affects my emotions. My mind affects my actions. My mind affects everything. And so once kahas has been elevated, which is the idea that we have the Torah in our heads, then we could raise the clan of Gershon also. And in fact, the Torah's power to raise us higher in this material world is manifest fully, not when it raises our consciousness, but when it elevates our mundane lives. In other words, if we learn about it and it's only in our brain and it's not going further and it's not affecting my mundane life, then that is not the full manifestation. So this is why the parshas Bamidbar and Naso are split. Bamidbar spoke only about kahas, which we said, even though he wasn't the oldest, he was put first because he carried the ark that had the luchais, the tablets, which is Torah, and that's first and foremost from everything. It's split, and now the second Torah portion talks about the clans of Gershon and Merari. So we're dividing specifically between Kahas and Gershon. We're dividing between them. We're saying count one, stop, count the next. Teaching us that we can achieve the real lifting of heads when it affects our mundane lives as well. Because if you would just put Kahas first, and he's on the highest level, and we would know that obviously he's on a higher level, not because he's not the oldest. So if you're putting it out of order, there's a reason. We're saying learning Torah on its own, just the luchais by itself, having them and carrying them, which means learning them, and is not enough. When it actually changes our action and we use our physical things to serve Hashem, that's when it's fully manifest. So he wants to make the break to show that this is something separate, and without this, it's not complete. So Gershon is at the beginning of the parasha. That highlights the advantage of action over study. As we've seen previously, Torah study and the concrete performance of Hashem's mitzvahs are superior to one another in different ways. So they each have their advantages. When you study Torah, it unites us in a very conscious way with Hashem. Because when you understand something, it can't be just on a you can understand things on a superficial level, but understanding something already has depth to it. It already has to be internalized. What do I mean? When a person does a mitzvah, I visit someone who's sick, I invite someone to my house, I light the Shabbos candles, whatever it may be, right? That mitzvah that I do, I could do it either robotically, I could do it without intention. So let's just take lighting the Shabbos candles. Let's say I'm used to it. Every week I just light the Shabbos candles. So it's kind of like robotic. It could be, it doesn't have to be, but it can just be something very robotic where what happens? I just okay, I know it's getting dark out, whatever. It's 18 minutes before sunset. So what am I going to do? I light my candle. That's just what I do. It's something that is automatic. And I light it. And while I'm lighting it, I could be thinking about shopping. I could be thinking about something I need to prepare, something that needs to get done in the house. I could be thinking about anything and everything, right? And what happens when I'm going to light the candles? I don't have any intention. I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing. But even if I'm thinking about it, godliness comes down into this world and it surrounds. And either when a person goes up to Gan Eden, after a soul leaves this world after 180 years, and it goes up to heaven, then it's able to reap all the reward for everything it did, and then it is able to get that reward. It's a ray of it, actually, not the full thing. And when Mashiach comes, so God willing, very soon Mashiach's going to come, and therefore we won't have to go to Gan Eden just to get a ray. We're going to have Mashiach, or we're going to get the entire thing, and we're going to actually feel. But it's like dollars in the bank. Every time we do a mitzvah, we're putting these dollars. And then one day we're going to come and look, I have $1 million. We don't feel it, but it's happening. So this godliness comes and surrounds. It's called makif or seive, which means to surround. Okay? It just surrounds me and it's there. But so when I do a mitzvah, it could be unintentional, it could be without thought, but I'm still doing it, I'm still causing godliness to come into this world. But when I learn Torah, this has an advantage that it has to permeate and come inside. Because you can't learn Torah without thinking. It's impossible. The whole idea of learning Torah is that my brain has to grasp it. I could be listening and not hearing. That's not called learning Torah. Learning Torah means understanding. I could say the words, and that has an advantage in itself, but that's not called learning. That's great. I'm saying holy words. I'm reading holy words. That helps. That has a lot of advantages, but that's not called learning. Learning is understanding. Even if you understand on a superficial level. So instead of the godliness just surrounding me and going around me, now the godliness is coming inside of me. So we compare Torah learning to clothing. That clothing surrounds you. And we compare mitzvahs to clothing that just surrounds a person. And we compare Torah learning to food. Food has to come inside your body. Food outside your body is going to do nothing for you. You're not going to get the nutrients. You're not going to get the satisfaction. It's not going to help. So they're different. They each have different advantages. But the advantage of the food over the clothing is that it's more internal and you take it inside. So when we learn Torah, Hashem comes inside of us. And not only just by a mitzvah, Hashem gives me a hug. But by Torah, I'm also giving Hashem a hug. So we're both hugging each other because Torah is a mitzvah, so therefore godliness surrounds me. But in addition, the godliness is actually permeating and coming inside. Right? Like clothing, people do care what their clothing is made out of, but you're much more careful about the food, what the food is made out of, because that's going inside of you. So it's a much deeper, more internal connection that Torah has, and it unites us on a very conscious level. But what's a disadvantage? It only affects my intellect. In contrast, so that was the advantage we said of Torah. Now we're going to bring up the advantage of mitzvahs. So we say mitzvahs, contrary to Torah, that only affects us intellectually. Only affects our intellect. Performing the mitzvahs, performing Hashem's commandments, unites us with Hashem only subliminally. But this, it may not be as that internal level. But guess what? It pervades the whole body. When you do mitzvahs, it's not just your brain. First of all, you do need your brain because your brain tells everything else what to do. So you are using your brain. But I'm using my hands, I'm using my feet, I'm using my mouth, I'm using my body. Okay? And recording the senses of the clan of Kahas first is emphasizing that Torah is superior because it's internal. It's my brain, and that's the prerequisite to everything. Without Torah, I can't, connect. But arranging the parsha so that the clan of Gershon introduces Parshas Naso, which means elevation. That emphasizes superiority of performing the Torah commandments, that it uses our body, and that this really fulfills God's will. And just the Torah learning alone is not enough. We have to perform the commandments. And that is not just a continuation to Kahas, but it's in its own parsha. And it's first in the parsha to show how superior and how great it is. If it didn't have its own superior advantage, then it would just continue in the last week's Torah portion. All right, Kahas is first because Torah is most important. Without Torah, you can't do anything. And then it would just go on to Gershon. But by putting him in a separate Torah portion to be first, that's showing that it has a superior quality also. And that is the emphasis of performing Torah commandments in a physical way. Which connects to what we were talking about last week, that ultimately, how do we fulfill God's will? Not through just being all spiritual and only learning Torah. You need that. That is, like we said, your brain is filled with that. That would affect your emotion and action, but that's the ultimate goal. So, yes, we need to learn Torah. That's prerequisite to anything. That's first. We first have to have our Torah. First have to be connected to Torah. That's our guideline. That's our rule. But then we can't stop there. We got to take it to the action. And their action is what actually brings down the essence of God. And finally, the fact that all this preparation, this elevation through Torah study occurs in the desert emphasizes the purpose and truest fulfillment of Torah study is to transform even a desert, a land that is barren, right, of spiritually. We should transform that and make it a place of God. So this is our whole introduction. Before we actually get into other travels in the journey, we have to set the facts straight. Number one, you have Torah. That's your tool. That's your guideline. That's telling you what to do. Number two, start off that mitzvahs is the ultimate. And that our goal is to transform all of the barren desert, all of the mundane into a holy place. So wherever we go and we see it's a place that doesn't have Torah, that doesn't have mitzvahs, What's our job? Our job is you make it into a place that is mitzvahs. That is our goal. That is what we're supposed to do. Now I'm going to spend a little time talking about a very interesting topic in the Torah. And this interesting topic is called Saita. And a Saita is a suspected adulteress. And it says that if there is a woman and she's married, and it says, I'm going to read you from the Chumash itself. Ish ki tishta ishtai umala by ma. If a man's wife should go astray and be disloyal or deal treacherously with him, and she is going to have intimate relations with another man, so she's a married woman and she's going and having intimate relations with another man, and she hide this from her husband, and there's many different things, but basically when the man finds out, the man has to warn her. It's a lot of details which we don't have time to go into now, but the man warns her husband and says, I don't want you to be in seclusion with this man, and and she goes ahead and she does it, even though, and he warns her in front of witnesses. And then he has to bring this woman to the Kohen, and she has to bring a special sacrifice. And the Kohen places her before Hashem. And the Kohen takes from this holy water, and he puts this holy water in a vessel, and he puts some earth from the Mishkan and floor, and he mixes it into the water, and she has to uncover her hair, and he places into her hand this offering, and she has to bring it up. And these then the Kohen puts her under oath, and he says, if no man has laid with you and you have not gone astray to become impure, right, in place of your husband, then you'll be absolved through these bitter waters. And if you have gone astray with another man instead of your husband, and you have become defiled because another man has laid with you, then these waters will clarify. And he says, if you are guilty, meaning if you did lay with another man and you're saying you didn't, then it's going to come in this water is going to go into your stomach, and it's going to cause your thigh to rupture and your belly to swell. So it's going to be very obvious. She's going to drink this water, and these curse-bearing waters are going to swell her whole stomach, and it's going to cause her thighs to rupture, which is it's a very big blessing that we're able to go to the bathroom. And if someone drinks and they can't go to the bathroom, eventually it explodes. And that's basically what happens to her. And he's going to write the curses on a scroll, and he's going to erase it. Then he's going to put it in the bitter water, and she's going to drink the bitter water. And when she drinks this water, it's going to basically, determine whether she is guilty or not. So if her stomach swells and her thighs rupture, that this water cannot go out of her body, does not let it go out of her body, and we know she's guilty. And if she's innocent, she will be able to have children. And it says she's going to have, better children than she had before. In other words, she's going to have improved fertility. If she used to give forth with pain, now she's going to give forth comfortably. If she used to give forth children that weren't so beautiful, now she's going to give birth to more beautiful children, etc. So that's the story in very, very short. And now I'm going to shed some light on some of the points. So, we have this idea that it uses the word tishta, that she went astray. And it says that this really is compared to every one of us when we want to sin. Tishta means act foolishly. And it means to sway, and also has the same root word as stus, or stus, or stut, however you want to pronounce it, which means foolishness. And it says a person, we are in a relationship with Hashem. Hashem is the husband and we are the wife. And every time we do a sin, we stray from Hashem. And really we're married to him. And we made an agreement. We got the Torah. And we committed that we're going to do the mitzvahs. And every so often we're disloyal. And we go, even if you don't do idol worship, but you go and we do sins, and we don't care so much about Hashem, and we kind of, veer away from that. And it says, when we sin, we are disloyal to Hashem. We're being disloyal, just like a woman who goes away from her husband and has relations with someone else. So when we do a sin, we're disloyal. And that's why it uses the word tishta, foolish. It says, only way that you could sin is if a spirit of folly, a spirit of foolishness falls upon you. What does that mean? It means that if I would really think about my connection to God, I wouldn't sin. If when I'm about to say a piece of gossip, I would stop and I would say, I am connected to God spiritually, not physically, but on top of me, figuratively speaking, there are 613 strands. There's a rope with 613 strands. And on top of that is Hashem. And that's my connection. And every time I do a sin, I snip a piece, a thread of that rope. And I'm disconnecting my connection with God. Or we say it's like there's a pipeline. And every time we do a mitzvah, it's flowing. God's godliness is able to flow to me. And every time I do a sin, I clog it. The more sins I do, the more clogged it is, the harder it is for God's godliness to come down to me. So the only way, if I would think about that, I'm about to say a juicy piece of Lashon Hara, or I'm about to eat something that I shouldn't be eating, right? I'm struggling in kosher. Or I'm about to do something on Shabbos that I should not do. I'm about to say a mean comment to somebody, whatever it may be. I just stop and I say, I am ruining my relationship with Hashem. I wouldn't do it. So how does a person get to sin and get to be disloyal to Hashem and have that disconnection and the disloyalty, just like this woman is disloyal to her husband? Only through being foolish, through not thinking about it. So the trick to not fall into sin is to be conscious and to think about things. To think, I have a connection with Hashem. Why would I want to ruin that? Why would I give that up? Just like, how would a woman save herself from being disloyal to her husband, going to another man? By thinking, I have such a good, strong, wonderful relationship with my husband. Why would I want to? That would be foolish. For a few minutes of satisfaction, I'm now going to ruin my whole relationship, my whole family unit. That doesn't make sense. So we only sin, it compares sinning to laying down. When you stand up, your head is on top and is in command of your hands, and your feet, and everything else. When you lay down, your head becomes even. Your head becomes even with your feet. And that's like when a person is foolish. When they sin, it means their head is even with their feet. Their head is not above. Their head is not in control and telling them what to do and thinking consciously about the right thing. And so that's how a person could come to sin. But if we realize this and we know that this is the way a person could come to sin, it could stop you from sinning. Because you could say, wait, I want to be head above feet. I want to be with my head in the right space. I want to be serving Hashem. Why would I want to clog up those pipelines that have so much good that are able to come down to me? Why would I want to sever that rope between me and Hashem? I don't want to. Okay, so that's the idea of how this story can apply to our life. We also learn from this story something very important, and that is that she's told to uncover her hair. Why is she told to uncover her hair? Because she's supposed to be disgraced. And what's the idea? What do we learn from here that's so important? It shows that a married woman, if she wants to be honorable, if she wants the proper and right thing, is to cover your hair. So this is the source in Torah for one covering their hair. That married women cover our hair. I mean, the original, this is the source in the Torah for it. It says that the reason why only married women cover it, I mean, the main reason is because it is a chayk, which means it's a law that's understood. We do it just because God said so, like all of our modesty laws. But just like God decided that, my collarbone needs to be covered, my elbow needs to be covered, He also decided that when a married woman gets married, her hair needs to be covered. And so that's just because God said so. But Chava was the first one to sin. And she was married and she caused her husband to sin. And since then, we have to cover our hair. Since then, the laws of modesty applied. So that's why it only applies to the married women. But we learn it actually from here. We know they're taking off her hair covering to disgrace her. So we know that the norm was to wear a hair covering. So that's why people cover their hair. That's the original source. And covering the hair, like we said, it's just it's because God said so. Hair is very interesting, though. I could talk about this concept of covering the hair, for a few hours, but I'm just going to give you one nice point because we don't have that much time now. But that is that hair covering is, when you think of hair, as long as it's not attached to the head, it doesn't have life. And the evil forces of impurity, they try to cling to the hair more than they try to cling to other things. Why do they try to cling to the hair? Because hair is connected to your brain, but yet it's separate. When you get a haircut, it doesn't hurt. If someone would cut, God forbid, someone's finger, or if someone would cut, God forbid, whatever it is, someone's foot, someone's head, you would feel it, but the hair you don't feel, because the hair is attached and it does get its life force. It keeps on growing, so it is attached to the brain, but on the other hand, it is separate. So just like lice can only live on something live, so too these forces of klipa, these forces of evil, they also don't have their own life force. They have to cling onto something holy, life force. So they try to cling to the hair specifically, because that's where all the also like extra extraneous, like sweat and everything comes out more where there's hair. That's where everything is like leaving the body. It's like the dumping ground. So therefore, evil forces do attach more to a woman's hair. And when she gets married, she becomes the recipient. And it's much easier for the evil forces to go to the recipient level than the giver level. It's like if I have a huge, big 5-ton thing of water and I offer you to drink straight from it, or I offer you to drink from a water bottle, small, it's from a cup, you're going to pick to do the cup. It's more comfortable. So it's the same thing with the klipa. It would rather come to the woman when she's a recipient. It'd rather come to the recipient as a small little cup to get from than to come from, Now, when you cut hair off, so people say, well, if you're wearing a wig, it's really hair. But hair that's detached the body doesn't grow, doesn't have that life, and therefore the evil forces don't come to it. And the idea is that your hair is covered. It's allowed to be covered in something beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that. People have a misconception and they think that covering hair has to be something that, you have to hide it because hair is beautiful. That's not true. You're covering it because God said it needs to be covered. And just like you could wear a beautiful dress to cover the body parts that need to be covered, you could wear a beautiful hairpiece also to cover it. And just like any mitzvah, when we buy an esrog, when we buy a menorah for Hanukkah, we buy a beautiful one, so we should do the same. If it's a mitzvah, we try to always do the same. There's nothing wrong with being beautiful. That's what the Torah encourages us, to be beautiful. But I learned you should be attractive, but not attracting. You want to look nice and put together, but not, that you're causing a lot of unnecessary attention to come upon you. And hair is very interesting because hair, there's straight hair, there's curly hair, there's long hair, there's short hair, there's, red hair, there's blonde hair, there's so many different variations. And hair is this concept of like, they say, let your hair loose. That's like imagination and like wild. And if someone's working in the army, you say your hair has to be put back in a pony because you have to be more like tame now, right? Or put your hair in a braid. When Chava sinned, actually, after Hashem braided her hair to tame her, to make it more. So we see her hair as like a lot of imagination. It could be long, it could be wild, it could be, right? It could be all different kinds of things. And so when a woman gets married, it's that idea, you cover that hair, all that imagination and that creativity, that you cover. Now you're committed to one man. You leave all your creativity, everything for one man. So we cover it as again, this is not the reason that we cover it because God said so. But this is like an idea that we could see from it, that when you cover your hair, it's like reminding yourself and restraining yourself that all that creativity, all that I have, that's only for my husband. It's not for other people, for the outside world. So I'm going to end with just one more point, and that is that it's very interesting that the waters, we could have, spent an hour talking about this whole story of the women and the waters and all that, but I'll end with this interesting point that the waters that went, they got stuck at the stomach before. Normally, what should happen to water that you drink? It should go out. It should come out when you go to the bathroom. But this got stuck and it couldn't go to where she went to the bathroom, to show that that's where, if she really sinned, she used that part of her body to sin, then that was stuck and it got stuck and it couldn't go out. So it was like parallel to what she did. The part of the body that you used to sin, that you're claiming you didn't sin with, that now is blocked and it can't go out. So every day when we go to the bathroom, there's a special prayer that we say. It's called a Shari Yitzhar, that Hashem formed us and he made our holes and he made our body work and that we could go to the bathroom. That's a tremendous blessing. So I'll end with that and have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thanks.